Hey everybody, it's Tim with Uniform Members for Christ, and you are about to watch part 2 of my Exodus Wanderings video. Now, the full-length video, which is about an hour and a half, is available on my YouTube channel, Uniform Members for Christ, up under my Exodus playlist, or I've broken it down into 3 parts for you. I will link all 3 parts below in the description, so if you have not seen part 1 yet, just know you're going into part 2 of this video. You have to watch part 1 for the context, or you're going to be completely lost. Alright guys, I hope you enjoy the video. Now, it would be a great story if it just ended right here. But actually, we have about a year left before they'll arrive at the boundary of the Promised Land. And during that time, some very interesting things occur. Only 3 days after the Red Sea experience, the people come to a spring named Marah. But the water was undrinkable. And in Exodus 15:24, it says the people grumbled against Moses. Here we go again. Now we find some very valuable information in verse 25. And he, that's Moses, cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log, and he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. And there the Lord made for them, that's Israel, a statute and a rule, and there he tested them. You know, brothers and sisters, God still puts us to the test today. In fact, the brother of Jesus, James, told us to rejoice when we encounter various trials because we know that the testing of our faith builds steadfastness. And he said we will need that in our journey. You know, the Bible tells us that our faith is precious to God. And so these tests are meant to refine your faith. We have to understand this. Temptations come from the devil, solely from him. His goal is to get you to stumble. I believe it's the book of Hebrews that talks about this race of faith that we're in. And he says to cast off all of the burdens that hinder us. And he says, and especially the sin that doth so easily beset us. So the sin actually will ensnare you in place. Sin ensnares you, okay? It's like vines that wrap around you. Whereas we carry certain things that just become luggage, right? We kind of become overburdened. I'm going to get nerdy on you for a second, but if you've ever enjoyed playing certain video games, sometimes you add so much gear to your character and there's actually a limit to what they can carry because they want it to feel a little realistic. And so sometimes you have to just throw stuff off and get rid of it to run. Another example of this is Pilgrim's Progress. We actually see that there's this, I can't remember all the characters and names or whatever, but anyway, there's the guy in the very beginning, he's actually carrying this huge burden, right? And kind of as he's running and in time, that burden just falls off and it's symbolic of him coming to know God. But anyway, so God will test us, brothers and sisters. And let me tell you something. We can look at bitter water one or two ways. We can look at this as an opportunity to say, well, God's abandoned us. Maybe he's not with us. We can grumble and complain. Or we can learn, because sometimes it does take time, to just give God thanks for whatever situation we find ourselves in. And I know that's hard, okay? I'm not saying I'm perfect in this. I'm not saying that I have this all together. What I am saying is we need to strive toward a place where we can say, okay, I'm going to do what the brother of the Lord said. I'm going to count it all joy, right? I'm going to say there's got to be joy in this because I know this is working something good in me when I'm being tested. What is Israel asking? Is God with us or not? Sometimes, brothers and sisters, God will be really silent, okay? And we really start to question, especially as a new Christian, and especially kind of in the middle of your race, but sometimes many times our elders have kind of figured this out. God's silent sometimes intentionally, right? He led them to a place where the water was undrinkable. Have you ever felt like that before? Have you ever felt like that God led you somewhere and the water wasn't drinkable? And you're like, this water's bitter. You know, God, I've got to have a refreshing. Have you ever cried out to God from the depths of your soul and said, I am so empty that I have to have your rain to fall upon this dry ground of my soul and refresh and revive me? You ever felt like that? I can tell you I have. I went through a couple of years when I was living overseas where I just felt like every day I was so empty and I just needed something fresh and new. We're going to get to some of that later. But anyway, I just tell you that because God led them there. Why? He led them, guys, to the bitter water to test them. So don't be surprised in your walk with Jesus if he leads you sometimes to a place that seems like it's bitter and yet he's doing it to test you to see, will you trust me? What will your response be to this difficult situation? Are you going to follow me or are you going to follow you? right? And he helps us be refined. Pastor Sujith in England, shout out to you if you watch this one day, said this. He said, don't be surprised when, he said, God is not surprised that you acted that way whenever you were put to the fire or to the test. You're the only one that's surprised. God did it to show you what was inside of you so that it could be brought out, so that it could be refined, right? Changed, dealt with. So it can be uncomfortable when we respond in ways that we didn't think we would respond. Listen, when we first start following Jesus, many times we think, I'm going to win every battle, I'm going to win every soul, I'm going to slay every giant. But guys, listen, I can promise you the test is equal to your profession and commitment. And let me tell you what that means. God will train you and teach you and lead you places to show you, hey, I'm good. You can trust me. This is how we fight this battle. And then at some point, he will lead you back to that place and say, okay, here's an opportunity for you to exercise what I've taught you. And that's how a test works. But just remember, just like any good professor, God has already prepared you for the exam because he wants you to succeed. Whereas the devil wants you to stumble and fall because that's what he did. Your Father in heaven wants you to succeed, and he wants you to pass every single test and to have faith and to believe in him. And his goal is to lead you. If he has to become quiet for a little while to test you, he will. All right? And so anyway, I just want to encourage you there. So the place was Marah, and it was undrinkable until God showed Moses a log. He tossed it in, and for whatever reason or however that worked, it made the water turn to something that was sweet and drinkable. You know, perhaps this is a better testimony for you. When I was in the military, I was sent overseas to live in Spain. Now that probably doesn't sound like a really difficult assignment to most of us. And in truth, it did have a lot of really great upsides. But I was ready to be home with my wife. I mean, we were in England. That's where we were stationed. We only had 3 years there. And here I am pulled off to go to, Spain for 7 months by myself. And I know, like boo-hoo, right? But the truth is, where I was at in Morón, Spain, we were out in the middle of nowhere, right? There was nothing around. I had to drive hour and a half or 2 hours to get anywhere. And which I did have an opportunity to travel. It was really great. But I thought that I was only supposed to be there for 6 months. And let me say this just in case any of my military brothers and sisters are watching me. I understand that having been in the Air Force, that our deployments were much shorter than our Army or perhaps Marine brothers and sisters. And I respect your labor and your effort and all the things that you went through. I was stationed in Afghanistan with some guys that were from the National Guard in Hawaii that were out there for 15 months, and they had been on their second 15-month tour. So they had gotten to go home for like 6 months and were back in the middle. And guys, this was not a good place. I'm talking, it was absolutely a horrible place to be. And these guys were out there for that much time away from their families. I mean, it was tough. So I honor those guys. But, when you want to go home, and many of the guys that have been in the military understand this, when you're ready to go home, you're ready to go home. I thought my orders were for 6 months, right? And so I'm getting really excited. I'm coming up like right there 2 weeks away from what I think is time to leave. And what's interesting here is that my orders actually were for 7 months, and I didn't know it. And so I kind of mentioned one day, oh yeah, I'm getting ready. I got like 2 weeks. And the guy's like, are you sure? And so I go back and I look at my orders, and sure enough, I've got a month and 2 weeks left. And guys, I'm telling you, it took the wind out of my sails. I know that doesn't sound difficult, but here's another thing you need to understand about a test. They all are specific to the person, right? Whatever I'm going through may not affect you, and whatever you're going through may not affect me, but we need to understand that God is permitting each of us to be tested in a way that is beneficial to us personally. And so what ends up happening, though, is what's so amazing about this is Pastor J.L. Knight, he actually sent me a message or called me, and he said, I've got a word from God for you. And I was like, wow, okay, this is amazing. And he said, while I was praying for you, this is what God spoke. Are you ready to let him test you, or willing to let him test you? Now, I know that sounds really crazy for something that God would ask a human being anything. But the reality is I really did believe it was from God, and I stopped and I paused and I prayed. I didn't know how to answer. And so I prayed for wisdom about how to answer, and this is what I concluded, and this is what I would encourage you with today. Father, if I am prepared and ready to be tested in whatever this test is, then give it to me. And if I'm not, please withhold it. And guys, I would encourage you to have the faith to pray the same thing if God is speaking to your heart right now through what I just shared with you. My test, guys, it wasn't what many of our brothers and sisters have to face. There's brothers and sisters right now in Syria and different parts of that world that is dominated by difficult religions that are suffering mightily at the hands of these religions that want them to deny their faith. They really have a crown of martyrdom and a glory in heaven one of these days. So many of them have lost their life for the sake of Jesus Christ. My test was nothing compared to that, but it still took the wind out of my sails, and it was very hard. And I had a lot of questions, and I didn't understand a lot, but God was giving me a chance to trust Him, And the same thing, brother and sister, for you, that God is giving you a chance to trust Him when He leads you to that place and it feels bitter. Maybe there's not enough water. Guys, I'm going to tell you what I think. For some of you, I think sometimes that can be a church gathering that you're part of, an assembly that you're part of. And you have been saying, God, I just feel like this is bitter water. I don't understand why you led me here. And matter of fact, I know this is a word for you, whoever it is that will watch this. The Lord's saying pretty specifically, He's led you there to test you. Will you grumble or complain in the wilderness where there doesn't seem to be fresh water? Or will you trust God in this season of your life? That is the question that the Lord says. Now, check out what verse 26 says here. We're still in Exodus. He says, if you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God and do that which is right in His eyes, and give ear to His commandments and keep all of His statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. So after the testing at Marah, God led them to a place with enough water that each tribe had their own spring and enough palm trees to camp beneath. So let's consider the Christ in Matthew chapter 4. It says He was hungered, very hungry, after fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, and then the tempter came to Him. And all of these temptations happened back to back to back to back. And then at the end, He tells Satan to get behind Him, to leave, get away from Him. And it says angels came and ministered to Him. So there is a time of refreshing after each test. Okay, God gives you time to be refreshed and renewed and revived. And we know that angels are ministering spirits sent to minister to those who are inheriting salvation. So we know that they will come to us after our trials, after difficult temptations and things that we've been subjected to. But God is faithful, and He will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you can bear, but with every temptation He'll provide a way out from under it for you. So God is faithful, and as we learn to trust Him, and we endure whatever trial has been set before us, or we resist the temptation, right? How do we resist the devil? The Bible says, submit yourself to God, resist the devil, and what? He will flee from you. So as we face these trials, may God help us to be strong. May we trust Him. May we understand that we are prepared for whatever we're facing because God has prepared us for that. And if we are following Him, sometimes He does lead us to places that seem bitter for a time, but there's always a refreshing to come on the back of that. Now, I'd love to say that the people of Israel have just learned their lesson and they're going to trust God now, but in the next chapter we find this in verses 2 and 3. It says, and the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Now, I find it very interesting that the people grumbled in the wilderness. The Bible is pretty specific in the words it uses, and it's because it just doesn't have time to waste words. I mean, can you imagine how long the Bible would be if we got every part of the journey? But we have what we need, and so I look at every word as important. And so in the wilderness, guys, your walk with God can feel like you're in the wilderness sometimes. You can feel like there's bitter water, a lack of spiritual food, a lack of refreshing. Our prayers can seem hindered, and here's the kicker, right? It can be very easy to point fingers at this point. Sometimes we point fingers at church leaders. Sometimes we point fingers at our friends that have failed us or that we've failed. But it could just be, as I mentioned earlier in this teaching, that God has simply brought us to a place of testing to see how we respond. So, what else can we learn? Well, in Exodus chapter 16, verse 3, it says, and the people of Israel said to them, this is Moses and Aaron, we should have died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, ready when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread until we were full. For you've brought us out here into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Now, is that the way we understood their time in Egypt? Now, just to be sure, let's check. Exodus 3:7 says, Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry because of their taskmasters, and I know their sufferings. Nope, doesn't seem like the paradise that they're making it out to be. You know, I mentioned this earlier, but now's the time I want to bring it out in this teaching. It reminds me of something that Jesus said in Matthew 4:4. It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. But you know what's really amazing about this? That Jesus is actually quoting that from Deuteronomy chapter 8. Let's look at that together. Verse 3, we're going to read a few of these. And you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness. I got to stop here. I just have to. Where is Jesus when he's quoting Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3? He's in the wilderness where he's been led by the Spirit of God for a time of testing. Okay, let's get back to it. So why are they in the wilderness? That he might humble you and test you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know about, and your fathers didn't know about it, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Is that not amazing? So Jesus is quoting out of the Torah, out of Deuteronomy, whenever Satan comes to tempt him. And can I say that Satan's temptations are not original? Okay, they've already been used. There's not something new going to pop up that nobody's prepared for. Okay, in fact, we're told in the New Testament that no temptation has overtaken us except that which is common to man. So we know that temptations occur to all of us. There's no new tricks, right? Satan can wrap it up and put a pretty bow on it, but there's no new tricks. And so Jesus is saying, this is how you resist a temptation. This is how you stand firm, is you look back at what has happened as an example for us, and then you make the opposite decision. Now, let me tell you this. From my research that I did, I think Israel at this point are maybe 2 to 3 weeks, perhaps a month into their journey. And remember, they've come out with cattle, perhaps food, I don't know. Jesus has been fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, I'm not saying by any means that they didn't have a right to be hungry, but to complain, to say we should go back to slavery so that we can sit beside a meat pot, and God is saying, you don't live by that. That's not what you live by. That's not what sustains you. My word sustains you, right? It's pretty amazing. Let's jump back over to chapter 16. We find something very interesting in verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not. You see what's happened here? God has led them to another place where there isn't sufficient food and they're hungry. Their response was, hey, we should just go back to Egypt. And God's saying, I'm about to rain manna from heaven and I'm going to test them again. Now, what's very interesting, we're still in chapter 16, verses 7, 8, and 9. Moses reminds the people that their grumblings are not against Moses, but against God. And let me tell you, brothers and sisters, sometimes we can be guilty of that as well in our church gatherings when God has appointed a certain person or people, hopefully, to positions of leadership, and they are godly and they're trying to lead us and they're trying to do what's right. Sometimes we can really grumble and complain against them and really not understand that God's working in a certain situation. This is so dangerous. We have to be so careful because Moses is saying, listen, you're not grumbling against us. You're actually grumbling and complaining against God. So I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to exhort you. Please be careful in your churches, because I know sometimes we can do this, especially when there's like a pastoral change and things. It is so easy to just grumble and complain about that person. But what if God really is using them to make change? What if he really is using them to change things and make them better, right? And we perceive, let me just tell you, familiarity is comfortable, right? Why do you think Israel's talking about, let's just go back to Egypt? It's not that it was good, it's what they knew. I really feel God speaking to some people. It's what they knew. It wasn't a good place. It just was familiar. Changes needed to be made so that they could really be free. So God, to deliver them, had to shake everything up. And let me tell you, brothers and sisters, sometimes that happens in our local congregations as well, that God will shake things up. Sometimes it's a leadership change and other things that he does. Sometimes he just changes our hearts as a community, as a people. But there are things that God does to wake us up, to shake us up, that we've just been comfortable in our pews and our seats so long. And he's like, hey, we need to wake up and get back to that thing that place where we loved each other, we loved God, we had zeal, we were hungry, right? Sometimes he shakes things up for that purpose. Now, at this point, I'd love to say that Israel they have it together, but not quite, okay? Verse 28, this is what God says. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? In response, he said this in response to the people disobeying the instructions regarding the gathering of manna. They were supposed to gather enough for that day, and then by the next day they were supposed to gather again, and they did this for 6 days, and then they had the Sabbath day where they didn't gather anything because they had enough for 2 days. And God's saying, what is he saying? Exactly what Jesus told us, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. I will provide for you daily, is what God was saying to them. You do not have to try to store something up. And you know what it was? Here's the problem. It was doubt on their part, because they heard the word of God. Tomorrow there will be manna. The next day there will be manna. So what happens? When you try to store that up, it shows doubt and unbelief at the word of God. And that is displeasing to him. Now, in the next chapter, chapter 17, the congregation of Israel, they moved on from the wilderness where they were, and it's just really funny that it's the wilderness of sin, okay? I know that's just a name, but it's just funny. Okay, and it was, check this out, at the commandment of the Lord. And God had them camp at a place called Meribah or Rephidim. But there were no water for the people to drink. You see what's happened? He's already led them to a spring that was bitter. They cried out, they grumbled, complained. Moses threw a law again, it became sweet, they had something to drink. And then God led them to a place where there were 12 springs, enough for every one of the tribes to have their own spring. And so then he feeds them with manna, and he's with them in a cloud by day and a fire by night, and they've seen all God's work. So what does he do? He says, okay, I'm going to test them again. I'm going to take them right back to a place with no water. Let's see how they respond this time. What do you think? How do you think they respond? I'm sorry, if I'm looking above you, it's because I've got another screen open back here. I'm just trying to make sure I have these Bible verses in front of me. Well, this is what they said. They said, is the Lord among us or not? And they're demanding that Moses give them water to drink. Verse 2 says, Moses said, why do you quarrel with me, and why are you testing the Lord? How easy can it be, especially when we're new to following the Lord, to ask that question? Is the Lord with us or not? And one thing that God teaches us through our walk with him, through our wilderness wanderings, because that's what this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is not home, this is a pilgrimage. You and I are on a journey to a kingdom and a city whose builder and maker is God. And one day, the Bible tells us clearly that there is going to be a time when we are called to heaven to be with Christ for a period of time, and then we're going to come back here to earth after it has been purged of all the evil. And so earth is our home, but not the current state of it. The curse has to be completely eradicated and broken, punishment has to be meted out, and then this earth has to be recreated the way it should have been in the first place. And so we will come back here then. But it can be very tempting to say, is the Lord with us or not? And the truth is, yes, God is with us, right? He's not going to leave you or abandon you. Listen, I've been through this enough. I can tell you, there's times I wonder, did I sin? Have I been hard-hearted? Have I been lazy? I've asked all the questions and I beat myself up all the time. And I think there is a good time for introspection. Don't get me wrong. But it's not like every time you don't feel the presence of God, it's not like you just messed everything up. Okay, it's not like God's just shutting you out because he's had enough of you. Man, I really feel God speaking to you, and I'm gonna share something with you. The Lord spoke to me one time back when I was really beating myself up years ago when I first came to know him, because I just kept failing in some areas. And there's a scripture, I don't know where it's found at, but it says a righteous person falls 7 times and gets back up. And God spoke to my heart in that moment, and I just understood that righteous person that falls 7 times is unto perfection. That number 7 means completion. So I'm not saying that we should sin. I certainly don't believe that we sin daily by any means, or that you should, but I do say that there's going to be mistakes, and we need to just get back up and trust God that he's good. He's going to punish us and correct us because we need it, because he's a good father. He's going to lead us and guide us. And guys, guess what? If you fail that test miserably, God is going to lead you back around to a similar test sometime in the future. And why? Because I've said it again, because he wants to refine you in that area. He's not doing it to hurt you. He's certainly not doing it for you to fail. And he's certainly not tempting you. If you feel tempted or enticed, you can go ahead and just resist the devil and submit to God. But a trial is something that God will lead you into for your own good, for your own benefit. So we can be tempted to say, is God with us or not? But I assure you that he is. Just like he was still with Israel. He's still with us, okay? Keep getting back up. That's my encouragement to you. Keep getting back up. You may fall, you may stumble, you may feel a million miles away from God. Just keep getting, trust him. He's going to bring that refreshing to your soul. He is going to rain down that wonderful rain upon your weary, dry soul in due time, just like he's done me so many times. He's going to do it for you as well. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching part 2 of my Exodus Wanderings video. That's it for today, but part 3 is linked for you in the description. All 3 are available on my YouTube channel, Uniformed Members for Christ, up under my Exodus playlist. Okay, so I also, as I said in the first video, I do have the entire video full length available for you in the same playlist. Exodus Wanderings is an hour and a half. And so guys, part 3 will be linked below, as I said, and take care. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.